I did it again. Welcome into the Noon Dish. I'm Tommy Ashley. That's Johnny. Oh, that's not Johnny T-shirt, but
No,
they're our sponsors. It's going to be a fun one today, boys.
we are so discombobulated.
That is Don Callahan on his hotspot phone. My internet crashed Monday, so I'm kind of worried it's going to crash. But we are here so we don't get fined. No, we're here because we love to do these shows. Shout out to Big Game USA, sponsors of all the football shows. I got to show the video. One day Don's going to pop up throwing a ball, but here's the video for Big Game USA. Get it.
You think you know North Carolina? It's not just the Smoky Mountains and the Old Well. This is Kenan Stadium, where the Jordan Fly Elite game ball makes its debut and its homecoming. Born to fly, built for Carolina, snag your Carolina Blue today.
Snag your Carolina Blue today. Get to biggameusa.com. Get to biggameusa.com and get your North Carolina official game ball that the Tar Heels will be using in the fall in Kenan Stadium. Don, what do you think about going to Ireland next year? We're going to do that?
I haven't brought it up yet, but I was going to bring it up to the powers that be and say, hey, look, there might be some recruits out there, so I might need to be out there and attend the game. So yeah, I think that's a really cool idea and a great experience for the players. Just to back up, because people mentioned the different angle and all of that. Yes, I'm on my phone hotspot. My internet went out about 15 minutes before we were about to jump on. Sat on the phone with a lady for a while. They troubleshoot it. They're going to have to send somebody out. And so that won't be until tomorrow morning. So we're going to just kind of do what we can. And so my preparation for the show was very little. So hopefully you don't throw too many curveballs at me.
Well, look on the bright side. At least we don't have to see all the Philly stuff in the background. So,
well, if you look closely, there is a Eric Lindros and then all of that. So there's...
yeah. Well, focus it down right there. You look at me. I've got like our sponsors. I've got Eric Montrose hat, a couple bobbleheads.
I have
baseball from Wrigley Field. Check out this right here. Can you see this?
I can see it, but what is it?
It says first time. It's when you go to Wrigley Field for the first time. They give you a certificate. That was last summer.
Do they
Very
really?
Cool.
So I've never been to Wrigley. That's on my bucket list.
Sat in the left field bleachers. Had a few beers. Got a foul ball. Or got a ball from Cattell Marte from the Diamondbacks.
Very cool.
Yeah, not a bad trip. It is awesome. Stay in the city, ride the train, and take it all in. 100% worth it. I'd love to go back. All right, we're talking about Noon Dish. That means we have a top 5 on Noon Dish, and our top 5 today is going to be top 5 home-cooked meals. Not going to be any store-bought stuff. Not even going to be any processed stuff. Top 5 home-cooked meals. And Tar Heel Ron's already knocking it out of the park in the chat. Don could use some decor advice from TA. I 100% agree. Look, I've got a lot more stuff. I'm just in the bonus room and not in my way up. One day we'll have a Cribs. We'll have I See Cribs. You remember that show, MTV Cribs? We'll do that. Don, since we talked last, there's been a few portal commitments.
We could do some hamburger helper. Someone, Eric asked.
Yeah, I mean, if
that's what you want. We're talking about stuff that you make at home.
That you cook. You don't bring it home. You don't warm it up in the microwave. You cook. You put together.
Yeah, hamburger helper counts.
Yeah, home hamburger helper. So in college, we used to get cheeseburger hamburger helper and put a taco packet in it. And that was our go-to in college at Highland Hills, N12 Highland Hills and apartments in Carborough. Those were the days. Surprised we all aren't dead now from heart attacks with the stuff we ate.
Yeah,
yes,
that
counts.
Melinda has a great question. I think if the interest was there, we definitely would have a weekly women's basketball show. The interest has to be there.
It before. Yeah, I've said it 100 times. And not only the interest from folks on the outside, the interest from folks on the inside. So, I think Coach Banghart does a weekly radio show with the school, but I'm all for them participating more in Inside Carolina stuff if we can get them on here. We had Renaya Kelly earlier in the year. It was a very good show. All for more UNC women's basketball stuff, but it's a two-way street. And our street's always open. There are no roadblocks, at least for me. Don, business, portal work, My
Yes.
title for this show is Still Work to Be Done for UNC in the Portal. Obviously, losing Beau Atkinson, Amare, Campbell, and many others to the portal outgoing. Coming in, the first question on the chat or in the message board was about defensive line, but we don't have defensive line commits to talk about. We did for like 30 minutes.
Yeah, and that was we probably should, in hindsight, obviously, but you can tell if you were on the message boards at that time, we were hesitant to report anything because it just, without going into too much details, it just wasn't adding up to us. And I think what threw us off, to be honest, and made us kind of or disarmed us a bit and kind of go against how we typically follow our rules for things is when Lombardi retweeted the On3 report that the kid had signed with North Carolina. So, yeah, that threw us off a little bit. But yeah, so North Carolina, to get into what you were planning on getting into, no defensive lineman commits since the spring portal window opened, which was a week ago, right? It opened a week ago.
Yep.
My days are starting to run together, and they're definitely looking. The problem is, and I've tried to explain this to people, is that the transfer portal in general, but especially during the spring portal window, it's not like Walmart, where you go into Walmart looking for milk and you have 6 different types of milks you can leave with. You know, it is more like a flea market. I'm sure that there's a better example I can use, or analogy I can use, but where you kind of go in and you see what's there and you see what you can make do with. And North Carolina, I'm sure the staff knows that they need defensive linemen, and there's just not a whole lot of them there. And the other part of the equation here is that, in general, the physical buildup, you know, the attributes that are required for the defensive line position at the highest level in college, you know, being a large human being who is very light on their feet. There is just not that many people walking the earth who fit those requirements. And so the pool is already very small. And then you have those guys, because of supply and demand, a lot of money is being thrown at these guys. You know, you could read lots of different stories about how, you know, players who are getting overpaid just because they're big linemen. And that's kind of part of the problem, is that once one of those guys jumps in the portal, everybody jumps in on them, and it's not easy. And so as of right now, we're unaware of any legitimate D-line targets. But the good thing about the transfer portal is that can change in an hour. You know, someone can pop into the portal. The window is open until Saturday, I believe, and someone can jump in while we're talking and change the dynamics. North Carolina can get a D lineman or two.
Yeah. To build on your analogy there, elite defensive linemen are like toilet paper, paper towels, and milk during a hurricane or during COVID. You go in there and there's none on the shelf. And if you find one, people are fighting over it. And they're paying a lot more than
eggs during the bird flu.
Yeah, or eggs during the bird flu and things like that. I mean, it is crazy to me. Obviously, Smith Vilbert from Penn State committed back in March. And like Don said, we referenced the other one that ended up at another school, did the old Bart Simpson's granddad allegedly walked in, walked out. But anyway, so defensive line is definitely a priority. But like Don said, it's not just going in and picking somebody. You gotta do a lot of legwork, and then you got to pay a lot of money for them. But Don, there have been some other commitments. Let's talk about these a little bit because it's interesting to me. We talked about how Carolina needed a running back to fill out the room. Obviously, Davion Goss looked pretty good in spring and in limited time last year. June looked decent in the spring game. Charleston French looked okay in the spring game. And now they've gone out and gotten a commitment from Michigan. Tell me about it.
Yeah, I mean, a running back who has, I guess the past couple of seasons has been in the back of the depth chart at Michigan. A team that basically runs an offense that what we're hearing North Carolina wants to run, where it's run the ball first, clock control, that sort of thing. And so he was kind of part of that. He got some reps, but there were clearly guys ahead of him on the depth chart the past couple of seasons, including the national championship. He's actually a Greensboro kid and actually grew up playing basketball with Bryce Baker. And then he eventually moved to the Atlanta area and played high school ball there. And then from there, committed to Michigan, signed with Michigan out of high school and spent a couple seasons there. And now he's in Chapel Hill. And I think really it was, I don't know what his transfer portal rankings are or anything like that, but I think it was a good pickup for North Carolina. The perfect sort of scenario, a guy who can walk into a situation where you can say, hey, there are definitely some carries to be had. And so it's a great situation for him. It's a great situation for North Carolina.
Yeah, 5'11", 235-pound-ish. That's some good size on a running back. I like the quote he had, and I'm not going to read the whole article because you need to be on the Tar Pit Premium message boards to read everything. But he said, I say what I lack in experience on the field. I've gotten so many great reps in this program, Hall said, after spring practice in Michigan. So he's right. And like Don said, Michigan likes to pound the rock. And, just being a part of that room says you're pretty good. And Don, tell me about some other guys since we met and how they came to be. We talked about Gio Lopez. Jason Staples and I did a show on Lopez. Sort of from your standpoint, how did the Lopez how did that come down and how did that all shape out? Because we heard about other quarterbacks and we continue to hear about other quarterbacks at times. But how did Lopez commitment come down for North Carolina?
Well, North Carolina needed a quarterback. I think this was a lot of behind the scenes work because he had never visited North Carolina until actually the visit started Tuesday, will end today for his official visit to North Carolina. And I think it was just a situation where, because he toyed with going into the portal back in December, chose not to. And he knew North Carolina had an opportunity where he was all but guaranteed a starter role, which makes complete sense because why would you leave the starter role at South Alabama where he put up some really good numbers to go anywhere else that you weren't guaranteed to be, or not, maybe not guarantee is not the wrong word. There wasn't a very high likelihood for you to become a starter, or at least get a good chance to become a starter. And that's what it came down to North Carolina. So I've talked to him a little bit. We haven't done like a full-on interview. Hopefully that comes through. And that's the little bit that I've kind of picked up through my interactions with him.
Can you clear the air on any of the other quarterback stuff?
Which ones in particular? The Nico
the
or the?
Names we continue to hear or have heard.
We were told that the Nico situation, North Carolina was never really interested in him. That makes, and I think we got into this last podcast, I think, but it makes sense. Belichick has never wanted to overpay for any position. I think everyone's saying Nico is not very good. He's a very good quarterback. Is he worth $4 million? No. Is he worth whatever? I think they're paying him over $2 million. I don't. I think that's probably the range you're probably getting into. I think he's a very good quarterback. The concern is he's looking for more. And then you also have to deal with the headache of the dad and the fact that they have already tried to hold out one other time, which means, the best predictor of the future is the past. And so, if he were to have an unbelievable season, he was probably going to hold out wherever he's at. And that includes at UCLA. So unless, the UCLA, I guess you could say hometown discount sort of thing, maybe it's a little bit different scenario there. Jaden Rasanda is another name who there were reports out there that he had scheduled a North Carolina official visit, which would have started today. That was reported to have been canceled, I guess yesterday. That situation I've heard mixed things on. When I saw it at first, it made absolutely zero sense to me at all. And if North Carolina was indeed messing with him, to me, I just feel like the risk far outweighed the reward there, because you're talking about a kid who got on the field at Arizona State. His numbers weren't very good. Just completed a little bit over 50% of his passes. His touchdown to interception ratio wasn't very good. And then he goes to Georgia. I get that. Oh God, who's the quarterback now? He's at Miami now for Georgia.
Beck.
I get that he was a starter, but when he went down, there was never any conversation about whether Rashada would get in or anything like that. So that doesn't speak very highly of him and his, and what the Georgia staff thought about him. And then all the baggage and all that. And then you run the risk of pissing off Bryce Baker and pissing off Gio Lopez. So it just didn't make a whole lot of sense. So I hope that a lot of this was not true, but who knows?
Crazy times in the transfer portal, and when social media and internet and the immediacy of, when you can turn a thought into a public statement on social media in a matter of moments, it gets kind of crazy out there.
Yeah,
Don,
and we're also now dealing with agents every day. We're dealing with more and more agents, and they are savvy at putting things out there to help their cause. And so that's one thing that we're going to have to be aware of, which the NFL is well aware of, but now we're going to be aware of. Can I also go on another separate little tangent here?
You absolutely can. Let me reset.
Okay.
This is the noon dish. The top 5 is top 5 home cooked meals. We're bringing out people out of the woodwork, dropping home cooked meals in the live chat. So if you haven't, get yours in there. That's Don Callahan. I'm Tommy Ashley, sponsored by Johnny T-Shirt and Big Game USA. Go Don.
All right, I'm going to defend Jason. I saw on the message boards people kind of jumping on him for saying that Ryan Brown was the number 2 quarterback in the portal, in the winter portal. And I thought that was unfair. Jason definitely, or he said something along those lines. I'm not refuting that. But Jason's when it comes to like the actual breaking things down and evaluation, X's and O's, Jason's one of the best that I know at those things.
We're talking about Jason Staples, correct?
Jason Staples, yeah. So I thought it was very unfair for those who kind of jumped on him for that. And not only that, you know who else thought very highly of Ryan Brown? Who else?
I would assume Bill Belichick.
Yeah. And not only, Jason just kind of put his name on it. That's all he did. And people will forget that soon. Belichick and company, or whoever made that decision, they put a lot of money in there. And I've seen some things that they might owe him. So yeah. And they have way more resources and information on Ryan Brown than Jason Staples did. So I think it's very unfair for those to kind of jump on Jason. And the other part of that is like, we're going to be wrong. That's just how it is with certain things. Mm-hmm. And if Ryan Brown has a great season at Purdue, because that quarterback competition is an absolute mess. So he could easily walk in there and win it. Then who knows?
If anybody has an opinion and puts your name on it, you're subject to catching it from somebody. And I get that. We all get that doing this stuff. I don't mind it at all. Yeah. I don't like when people are unfairly personal, because nothing that we've said is personal. Like, Jason doesn't criticize or critique a player because it's personal. He does it purely based on tape and things like that. And that's what we try to do here at Inside Carolina. But yeah, I mean, it's an echo chamber, right? When whatever prevailing thought gets going, it sort of rolls downhill. And if you're underneath it, you get kind of flattened a little bit sometimes. But I still remember Jason Staples talking about Drake May as a sophomore and junior in high school, saying that kid's going to be an NFL first-round pick. And maybe that was an easy one, maybe not. But kind of is what it is. Don, other commitments. Carolina got a kicker and a punter after all other specialists or the kickers were encouraged to hop in the portal at North Carolina, we'll say.
Yeah.
Horvath out of Eastern Illinois. Is it Verhoff out of Marshall?
Verhoff.
And then Adrian Wilson. Every time I think of Adrian Wilson, I think of the former NC State player, but Colorado wide receiver. How did he become a North Carolina Tar Heel, Don?
It was another situation where, I believe he's supposed to be officially visiting this week. If he didn't earlier in the week, but committing to North Carolina out of the portal without having visited. He's a kid who made, 3 or 4 commitments during his recruitment, which was pretty interesting. I think he also attended a couple of schools. So, get to know him now because he might not be here in a year or two. But if history were to repeat itself, the kickers are interesting. I like the Marshall punter. I thought his numbers were good, but the kicker, just based off of his numbers, I think he's only attempted 1 kick over 50 yards. And he converted it, but over his career only attempted 1 kick. I thought that was surprising. So it didn't seem like he had a very strong leg, or at least have opportunities to show that strong leg. But seems pretty accurate. It's interesting. Because you had some guys who had some potential in the spring. Obviously, they didn't work out, so you're kind of just putting all your money on him to be the kicker for the season, which surprises me. What I know that the kickers didn't blow anybody away in the spring, but just basically wiping out that room for some guy who did put up okay numbers, above average numbers, but you haven't had him on campus. What were your thoughts?
I mean, it's going to be, like I said before, it's either going to be a smashing success or a colossal failure. But I think cleaning out an entire room is you putting marks, targets on yourself when you do things like that. If things go sideways, now granted, it's a business, and we said all along that spring practice was going to be a tryout. And when new coaching staffs come in, whether it's Belichick or whether it's whoever, then things change and things flip and all. Cleaning out, dead weight or whatever they want to call it, or people that don't fit the narrative. I don't know how a kicker doesn't fit the culture or whatever. You know what I mean? It's not like you're going to scheme something different.
If you've ever been at any sort of football practice, the kickers are usually way by themselves, other than that one period where they have to come in for field goals, but they're way by themselves. They seem like the loneliest human beings there are, just kicking by themselves.
Yeah, and most of them are usually pretty weird, got some weirdness into them. So, and I know plenty, and I know a couple of the best to do it, and they're weird, and they probably admit it. But they're also extremely important for a program. Punter, I can see wanting to go different directions on the punting aspect of it, get off the rugby style punts and all that type thing. So we'll see how that goes, but it's going to be it's interesting. And that leads me to my next question before we take a break here is, how many more? I mean, I feel like every day or every other day I'm getting a text from inside Carolina, meaning from Don Callahan's work, telling me somebody committed. No defensive tackles. We've talked about that have come along. You did an article about the edge rusher reset, which is really more high school-ish there. But talk to me about, you got Dayton Sneed commits. I guess that was yesterday. We talked about Benjamin Hall. That was Monday. I'll ignore the Lavon Johnson one from last week. We've already talked about that. What's next? I mean, how many more do they take? How many more do they need, in your opinion, in your reporting?
Are you going to go to break first, or are we going to
You want me
You
to go
want
ahead
me
and
to
do a break? Let's do a
okay.
break. I'll give you time to breathe. Johnny T-shirt and JohnnyT-shirt.com sponsors the show. Look, go see that crowd. Right here's the URL at the bottom of your screen. Go see that crowd on East Franklin Street. They're awesome. You go in there and you tell them Inside Carolina sent you, give them the code. They will take 10% off your order. And I promise you, you can find everything you need for North Carolina fandom. And personally, if it were me, I'd go get a baseball jersey and I would be in Chapel Hill the week of May 9th through the 11th to see NC State come to town. It'd be a huge series. Wear your Carolina gear. If you can't get there, go to JohnnyT-shirt.com, spend some money online, support local businesses. Franklin Street looks a lot different, folks, from what it used to look like. But there's one constant, and that's Johnny T-shirt. And they will be there and always be there as long as we do our job and support them like they've supported us. National guys pay the bills. And then Don will come back and answer my question if you hadn't forgotten it already. It's the noon dish. Okay, Don.
All right.
Targets remaining. What's needed? Obviously, defensive line is major. Linebacker, I guess, maybe still needed. We haven't talked about that. But it feels to me like there's a lot more work to be done in this portal, even though we've talked about for weeks and months that the spring portal's lighter and less busy than the fall or the winter portal. I don't believe you at this point.
Well, I mean, we're still not anywhere close to what the 19 or 20 that they took out of the portal in January. It's hard to put a number on it because, as I said, we just don't know what's going to come in to the portal. I'll have a better idea once the portal closes. But we do know that they have expressed some interest in some tight ends. We've reported that a couple of times on Inside Carolina Tar Pit Premium message board. We mentioned about my internet. Hold on, I just want to see some. I think my internet might have went back on, but anyway, I've reported about a defensive back from California who visited recently. I mean, I guess some of this stuff is actually on Twitter, so I could probably name names. Andrew Simpson is a linebacker who officially visited yesterday. So obviously still wanting to work on that linebacker group with losing Amare Campbell, which I think was a pretty significant loss, especially considering the type of defense that they want to run. Because I felt like he was an ideal Belichick inside linebacker. Offensive line is one that I'm surprised a lot of people haven't been mentioning. Like, why haven't they been going harder on offensive line? We have some information on some players that we're still trying to confirm and all that UNC is interested in along the offensive line. So don't be surprised if, with this stuff, it's like by the time we're able to report something, the commitment is about to happen. So don't be surprised if there's a commitment that pops with offensive linemen. I'm trying to think here. And I think that if any position just kind of pops up, I mean, you obviously have your objectives that you're trying to meet. And again, it's hard during the spring window. By the same token, there might be a position that you might not necessarily be looking to address, but a guy pops in there and you're like, wow, he's a good player. The Christian Dunbar Hawkins. Yeah, I don't know if DB is the position where I would be top of my list to address in the portal. Am I wrong from what you've seen, Tommy?
No, I mean, I think you can always have depth, but
Yeah.
Assuming the current roster stays what it is.
Yeah. But if you were going to rank, the position groups, DB would probably be towards the end, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah. So you get into a situation where you have a guy that you like who might be related to somebody on your staff, then you jump on that opportunity.
Well, my thing is I would probably put wide receiver not at the top of the list of needs. And they've gotten Snead from Tennessee, and we mentioned the Colorado guy. I mean, obviously, I'll ask you this way. Why is it seemingly easier for Carolina to get skill guys than big uglies? Is it purely as a numbers thing?
Yeah, it's what I mentioned earlier. It's just same thing for offensive line. for the physical attributes that are required for the offensive line and be able to be athletic within that size, relatively athletic within that size, it's not easy, to find those guys. There's just not a lot of those human beings walking the earth. So it is harder. Wide receiver is one of the easiest positions to find, because if you look at it, there's always, like in the portal, there's always wide receivers who had great years the previous year. There's always high school recruits, particularly in this area. There's never been a time where you've looked in this region and been like, wow, there's no wide receivers. We're going to have to go to Florida for wide receivers. No, there's always, in-state, South Carolina, Virginia, and then if you go into Georgia, there's always tons of wide receivers and skill players. Running back, every high school team has a guy at running back that they love, so there's always tons of running backs. So and the quarterbacks we know about a lot more just because of the nature of the position and because there's tons of groups who will get those names out there, and they're always practicing year round, and they're the face of 7-on-7s and that sort of thing. So yeah, but it comes down to the fact that there is just not enough human beings that are large enough and mobile enough to play those positions. And you need 5 of them for the offensive line. And depending on your defensive front, you're going to need 3 or 4, maybe 5 just to start, whereas you only need 1 quarterback,
It's crazy how it works, but I hope that helps folks understand a little bit about how everybody says, why don't they get these guys? Well, Don just explained why it's so difficult. And now with the money aspect of it, it takes a lot of money to get it done. I think that would be interesting to see how these teams delegate. If you have a $20 million pot, how you delegate that money to the positions, not only to get them from the portal, but keep them from going in the portal. And we've seen, like we've talked about, the big names or a couple big names from North Carolina go in the portal. Don, let me switch gears a little bit here and ask you, the NFL draft's coming up here tomorrow night, first round. A guy like Amare and Hampton's presumably going to go in the first round. Carolina's got a couple others that could get drafted. How big a deal is that aspect of program now? I know in the high school ranks, you want to be developed, you want to go pros. Is it just purely transactional now, or does that still matter?
I think in the portal, it's very transactional. I don't know I still don't think it's transactional 100% or anywhere close to it in high school. I just don't, not based off my conversations with lots of different people. But in general, I think that how well a team does, it definitely helps. If you do well in the draft, it definitely helps. I think it's overblown. If you can remember, to take it away from UNC, do you remember when NC State had like 4 D linemen that were drafted pretty highly that one year? And there really wasn't a huge amount of, it helped them, but they weren't able to keep that going. And it just, because there's just so many other factors involved. Like, who was the position coach? Well, position coaches change all the time, but certainly when you can say, hey, Julius Peppers played here, Mitch Trubisky played here, Drake May played here. I mean, that definitely helps with the kid, and it helps with what we talk about all the time, the prestige, for sure. And so it's free advertisement. That's the one thing, free advertisement that, hopefully Omarion gets drafted in the first round on Thursday night, and there's going to be a lot of recruits who are watching it. And so North Carolina's name will be mentioned. And so it's a free advertisement. It's going to definitely help. It's equivalent to, why does Bojangles purchase a billboard? Does that mean every person who's driving past that billboard is going to stop and go to Bojangles? No, but it helps bring people into that Bojangles. It's the same sort of concept. It's free advertisement. Whoever's watching the draft will see all those players who were drafted, and and if Hampton's drafted, obviously North Carolina will be talked about a bunch. Belichick will be mentioned a bunch, and that will definitely help North Carolina with whoever's watching at that time.
Do you stop places based on billboards?
Well, sometimes I've been in the middle of nowhere, And so if you see a billboard that says, "Hey, Bojangles 2 miles on the right," yeah, you're like, "Woohoo!"
I'm there. Somebody on the message boards was
I,
mentioning like Bucky's, and I saw Mac Brown do that thing, like got to get the brisket sandwich at Bucky's. I've never been to Bucky's or
I've
seen a
been.
Bucky's,
I
but
just went to use the bathroom and just to see what all the fuss was about. It is weird how many people are there. It is like Walmart or Best Buy on like Black Friday. The amount of people walking in and out, and it's just
every
like
day.
you're like, where do these people come from? Especially the Buc-ee's that's closest to us is what? It's right over off 95, right?
I don't know. I
Yeah, I'm
don't.
pretty sure
I don't.
it's in South Carolina, right off 95.
Oh yeah, maybe down that way. But yeah, I've never seen one nor been to one. So
I went
everybody
in.
keeps talking about them.
I had to pee really bad, and I was like, "Oh no, there's going to be a line." But they have massive bathrooms. There's no waiting. I got in and got out. My family ended up staying in there a long time.
I
I'm a
think
very
David Hale. David Hale, the folks know who David Hale is. He had to spend 24 hours in one, and sounds like you could do that pretty easily.
I bet.
The way it's set up. Anyway, we're talking with Don Callahan on the Noon Dish. Running out of topics, but portal work we've covered. Alfred Thomas in the chat, you were asking about Jaden Rashada. We talked about him earlier. That's not a thing anymore, if it ever was. What else, Don, that we need to talk about on the recruiting side? Because there's a lot of food suggestions in here. And people, if you're late to the party, top 5 home cooked meals. No processed stuff, no stuff you got out of a box, unless it's Hamburger Helper that you dress up. But top 5 home cooked
Something that
meals.
you made. Yeah, no, I mean, if you take it out and you're just throwing it in the oven, something that you at least made or.
Yeah. You got to
know.
make it, it's not like, God, you remember those meals that used to be in the tinfoil, like Hungry Jack or whatever?
Yeah.
That doesn't count.
Yeah. The TV
Anything
dinner.
left on the recruiting front? Sort of, what's the timeline here?
Yeah, so there is there's actually a bunch. I mean, we're talking about the portal mostly, but UNC will have official visitors this weekend. One actually canceled, but we mentioned about Dayton Sneed. He's going to be officially visiting North Carolina this weekend, which obviously he's committed, so it doesn't seem like a big deal. But he's officially visiting with his brother Carson, who is a blue chip tight end who's committed to Tennessee, but has a bunch of official visits scheduled and has visited North Carolina as well as a bunch of other schools earlier in the spring. And to be honest, I felt that North Carolina was not a real option for Carson until Dayton committed. And when I spoke to Dayton the other day after he committed, just the things he said about how close him and his brother are, and how it is a dream of theirs to play at the same school and that sort of thing. It doesn't guarantee, they're not a guaranteed package deal. I think that Carson will probably go through the process, but I like North Carolina's chances a whole lot better now than what I did a week ago, to be honest with you. So that's pretty significant. He's officially visiting this weekend. I don't know. It's hard for me to think that this kid is going to all of a sudden shut it down after this weekend, but I guess anything's possible. And North Carolina definitely has an X factor in that recruitment. And I think there's been some talk of some other guys being added to the weekend. I don't know if they're going to be added, so I'll just kind of keep that quiet for now. So I think the official visits will die down a little bit in May until that last weekend of May, which is actually really, I think it's like May 30th is a Friday, and then June is the weekend. And that's mostly because there's a lot going on in May from I think track meets, state championship track meets and 7-on-7 stuff, and high school spring practices start up for most states, including North Carolina and Georgia. So it makes travel a lot harder. So you won't see a whole lot of official visits in May, but it will crank back up a lot in June. And that's kind of where we're at with things. As far as the portal, it closes on Saturday, but players can make their decision all the way up until whatever, the schools that they're interested in, whatever their enrollment criteria is. And that's going to differ from school to school. And, you can enroll in the first summer semester, which is ideal, or you could, wait until the second summer semester, and there's some buffers there. So I think some of that stuff could potentially drag on a little bit. I would still believe that most decisions will be made within the next week or so. So anything outside, if you're hoping that if North Carolina doesn't have a defensive tackle in like a week, it's probably not a good chance that they're going to add a defensive tackle to this roster before the fall starts.
Well, the portal closes when it closes, but you also can go in anytime when you're a grad. Is that accurate?
Yes.
And if you have a coaching change of some sort.
Which you would think would be unlikely, but yeah, we have situations that happen.
Yeah, so you would think that would happen, but those are the two caveats. And also, if the portal closes at midnight on whatever day and somebody gets in at 11:59, you're probably not going to hear about it for a day or two because it needs to matriculate through the system.
Yeah, I think
now with social media and Twitter and folks,
you do have, it might be, and they could have changed the rules. So always change the rules. I think they have like a business day, maybe 24 hours or something to put them in. So there's a little bit of that too. But still, if you look at, there was a lot of activity on that Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, kind of died down a little bit over the weekend. It's been more of a trickle these last few days. I think that's going to kind of continue. That doesn't mean there won't be anyone added in, but to be this mass amount of players added to the portal, that's just not going to happen.
Let me ask you a random question.
If
you took an all-star team from the guys in the portal that never found a home, how many games could you win in the ACC?
I don't think you could win any. That never found a home?
Like the guys that never found a home. Yeah. If you took the best 22 out of the portal that never found a home, how many games could you win in the ACC?
Yeah, my guess was you wouldn't win any.
Interesting.
Well, if you think about it, right? The guys who are landing places, a lot of them are not starting at their current school. There are exceptions, definitely exceptions. North Carolina has 2 of them in the portal. But even like the Michigan running back, who I think was a great addition for North Carolina, this was a guy who wasn't a starter at Michigan. So, so if you're going a step lower than that, then you're talking about guys that no other staff found a need for you, which I think is pretty significant.
Yeah. Did you see DeAndre Boykins? He committed to Coastal.
Coastal.
To Oklahoma State. And then flipped to Oklahoma State.
Yeah.
You're talking about, can you find a bigger difference than Myrtle Beach to Stillwater?
Yeah. Yeah.
From Chapel Hill to Myrtle Beach, just good gracious.
Yeah.
He has covered the range of.
I thought he was, first of all, he was a unbelievable athlete in high school. You're definitely a jack of all trades. And I remember the question always was, what position would he be? Would he be a running back? Would he be a defensive back? Yada, yada. And then he actually started off his UNC career, and looked pretty good. And then I know he had the injury. What happened?
I just don't think he got a chance last year. I don't know if he was still hurt. I felt like he should have gotten more of a chance last year. Given it, the defense needed help at times. Who you play him over, I don't know, but you play him and give him an opportunity. I don't know. I always liked him. I thought, back in that Miami game down in Miami a couple of years ago where he made plays and all, it's one of those things just like J.Q. Conley. Those guys.
Well, him was mostly the
injury and
then academics.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's got a lot of guys are what ifs, but I think Boykins should have been given more of an opportunity last year to play. And, don't blame anybody from going to greener pastures if they're there, but Coastal to Oklahoma State, that's wow. I mean, that is a large difference. But anyway, somebody in chat said, did we talk about DT transfer? Yes, we talked about that early. That was one of the first topics. So hit rewind and check it out.
There were a couple questions in the thread.
You always say that. Oh, on the board thread. Hold, please. If you were lead recruiter for the class of 26, what holes are the most glaring and what guys are realistic targets to go all in for roster completion? That is from WG Heels, who have not seen before on the board. So shout out to the new questioner.
Yeah. So I think right now, I mean, the one that we haven't been talking about is quarterback. And the reason why I say that is that Zaid Lott. Now are we talking about high school recruiting, right? That's the question. High school recruiting.
He says class of 26, so I would take that as high school.
So Zaid Lott flipped to Syracuse, and if you look at the board, you have Travis Burgess, who is down to North Carolina and Auburn, and I believe the crystal balls are pointing to Auburn, which is not a really good sign. Not saying North Carolina is out of it, and then I think the only other quarterback that UNC has offered and brought on campus is Duckworth. I'm trying to remember who his first name is. And yeah, so if Travis ends up at Auburn, what does that mean for the quarterback situation? And I mean, maybe I'm old school and the new staff is new school. But my mentality has always been you take one quarterback per class. So Landon Duckworth.
Yeah. Has the portal eased the pressure to do that though?
Yeah, I mean, I guess you could say that. I still think that to get a top, everyone's going to bring up all these different scenarios where it worked for other schools. And a lot of those schools we're looking at LSU and Ohio State, who have the money and have the prestige to be able to sway a super talented quarterback out of the portal. And I think with North Carolina, I think it's still, you still have to build from high school up. And North Carolina is just not in a great spot at quarterback right now. And some of that has to do with just missing at high school, in the high school classes, the prior high school classes. And they actually, Bryce Baker, I think, will be a good player. And I've said that multiple times. So this is not a shot at him, but I think he'd benefit from a redshirt year. But I just think that you got to build through the high school ranks. I just don't think you get a player the quality of Bryce Baker out of the portal. I think you have to get that guy in high school for North Carolina, if I'm being honest.
Unless you'll spend a boatload of money for somebody. Blue Heaven Big Hitter, last question from the chat and from the board. How does Don recommend the fans evaluate portal season, previous star rankings, positions of need, stats from previous schools? While far from perfect, the high school ranking system was clear. The portal seems like a different animal. What saith you on that?
He's absolutely correct. I mean, I don't even look at the portal rankings because anytime I want to, I go and look and they're not ranked. And I'm not taking a shot at those who do the rankings. It's just tough because everybody mostly enters at once and then they kind of trickle in. And yeah, it's a lot of work in a short period of time. You'd have to have multiple people doing it, and working, full days and all that sort of stuff. So we don't have the rankings to kind of lean on with that. And then the other part of that is that because we're not, high school rankings are all projections, because the reality, if you have been following high school recruiting, you understand that these guys are more than likely not going to contribute to your team in the upcoming season. Yes, there's exceptions, but for the most part, it's not going to be until year 2, 3, or 4 before you actually see these guys on the field. So it's all projections. With the portal, in most scenarios, you're trying to plug holes. So I think with that said, I think the rankings, while they would be helpful if we had them, I think it's still more of an art than a science to it, meaning, for North Carolina, we talked about Ben Hill, the running back, and from Michigan. And for North Carolina, he brings much more value than he would for maybe somewhere else. You know what I mean? So I think that, like the Bayer, the Mackay Bayer kid from Mizzou, he's a guy who now, with knowing that Campbell is gone, he's a guy that brings a whole lot of value to North Carolina, whereas coming into Mizzou clearly wasn't that valuable because they found out they didn't really need him, and they were able, he didn't get a starter role out of spring practice. So I think there is a little bit more art to it, to figuring out the fit. Fit matters so much more, and I think it's really, the value is definitely in the eye of the beholder in each situation.
And bottom line, it doesn't matter until August, until the games start and who wins and who loses. That's when you ultimately grade all this stuff, at least to me, because I love the work that Don does in recruiting, and I love all the stuff that Inside Carolina does, but just show up on the field and play, and then we'll find out how good you were or how good you were not. And TCU, on to TCU. I'm moving on the food right here, Don.
All right.
Top 5 home-cooked meals that you made or somebody made, not somebody put in a box, even though I'll tell you, the pre-cooked meals they've got at Costco, unbelievable. Let's go. Eric Miller, we'll throw him up here first. Mac and cheese, 3-cup chicken, gang ho. I'm not very good in the languages. I do not know. Meatloaf, spaghetti with ragu.
Eric, help us out here.
Melinda Dolphin, chicken divine, scallop potatoes and ham, macaroni and cheese deluxe, ginger garlic salmon. Now, I love some salmon, so I might have to try that. Teriyaki marinated steak. I've tried that before. You can't go wrong with a good steak. Sean Crawley, always in the chat. Homemade ravioli, homemade lasagna, spaghetti and clams. Oh, I don't know about that. Stuffed chicken with potatoes and vegetables, which are grown from the garden, and pizza if you have Italian in-laws. I love some pizza. IP3 in Chapel Hill is a go-to. RVA Hills, fried chicken, meatloaf, baked mac and cheese, chicken pot pie, and pot roast. It sounds like a Sunday Easter dinner.
Yeah, I'm not a pot roast guy, and I'm not a meatloaf guy.
Look at Kofizi right here. Smoked ribs, homemade lasagna, shrimp scampi, ribeyes with potatoes, beef and broccoli, and fried rice. Jordan Gibson got in late, but threw out chicken spaghetti, corn. I don't do corn. Green beans, garlic cheese, Texas toast.
Jordan's pretty healthy.
Paul H., some Italian pork chops are delicious. Jordan bringing it again. Pork chop, casserole, chicken spaghetti, smothered chicken, onion gravy or smothered steak, Dorito Mexican casserole, chicken and dumplings. I'm hungry now. Have not had lunch. Don, what you got? Okay, here you go. Miller explaining. Gang ho is a Thai curry with glass noodles, kind of like stir fry. The name basically translates to leftover curry.
So Katie does a lot of that sort of stuff. So maybe I've had it.
What is your favorite? Give me your top 5 quick. I did not write mine down, so I'm just winging.
You never write yours down. All right. So I love tacos. Especially if you cut up some onions and tomatoes and lettuce, and we did it last night. Make it we do it like a little bar. You get your shell, all that sort of stuff. And
they're tacos. Real tacos don't have shells, dude.
Look, I don't give it. Don tacos have shells. Okay. Don't piss on my parade, Tommy.
I know what you do. I've been to the quote unquote taco bar at Don's house. He's right. It's pretty good. It's good.
All right. And along those same lines, love fajitas. Same sort of concept. Only you get some fresh green peppers and onions and the seasoning for the chicken. I love that. Steak, ribeye, love throwing it on the grill. Choose your seasoning sort of thing. Maybe a baked potato on the side. Love it. I love Italian food. So really anything with red sauce if it's spaghetti, ravioli, whatever. I saw someone say something about a homemade pizza. I dig that too. I mean, that's, if I'm coming to your house, make some sort of pasta, red sauce, and we'll be good for sure. That or Mexican food, obviously from the tacos and fajitas. But I'm usually pretty good, unless it's like, this is going to offend some people. I'm not like a big like Southern food thing, like, because I don't like healthy foods. So,
I mean, yeah. So, since when is Southern food healthy? I mean,
Well, I'm
have you
talking about
not
like
been to like Mama
green
Dips?
beans, and
Rest in
I mean,
peace,
I
Mama
love,
Dip.
yeah. I mean, I'm not a big fried chicken person. I'll eat it. I'm not a big fried chicken person. So yeah.
Mine are my mom's baked chicken, rice and gravy. Man, that was a go-to. I probably ate more baked chicken and rice and gravy and some green beans growing up. Love it. I like chicken casserole if it's done right. Broccoli casserole if it's done right. What else we do? We do any baked chicken and rice meal. I love. I don't like red sauce. You and I have good chemistry on here. I don't think we have good food chemistry because I'm not a red sauce person.
So you like white sauce?
I like a whiter, like an Alfredo-ish type sauce. I'm not a big.
So I don't mind that.
Sauce.
We do white sauce, probably more than I would like. I don't mind it as a kind of like a change up. Speaking of which, speaking of change ups, Bruiser Net is right on it, saying let's wrap. Yeah. Phillies versus Mets at 1. Hopefully the Phillies don't freaking lose. Look like crap past 2 nights.
We've got 30 seconds. But yeah, I like chicken Alfredo. I prefer ribeyes. That's my go-to steak because I feel like you can season a ribeye really good, even though a filet is really nice. But you could put me on an island, a deserted island with nothing but one meal, and it would be my mom's baked chicken, rice, and gravy. And I would love it forever. So I'm going to leave it at that. Seems like a good thing to leave it at. So we can get out of here so y'all can watch the dang on Phillies. Hope they lose, even though I don't like the Mets either. I do like Lindor.
Wheeler's pitching, so Lindor's having a good season. He's been kind of a bugaboo for the Phillies the past 2 nights, but Wheeler's pitching, so that will at least give him a chance as long as they can hit.
Go watch the Phillies. Go watch InsideCarolina.com with Don Callahan's work on the Tar Pit Premium message boards. It is fast moving in the transfer portal. Don's been all over it. Sign up for the text at Inside Carolina if you're a premium subscriber. If you've not already, you'll get the text letting you know exactly when and where people commit to the Tar Heels, both basketball and football. Shout out to Big Game USA. Go buy the official football. It's the only ball you need if you're a Carolina football fan, and also Johnny T-shirt. As always, thank you, Don.
Thank you, Tommy.